propped up in the mainstream media, of course, because she, her work sort of bolsters all of these myths about Muhammad that comfort people.
Very much so, yes.
Right.
And she has a new book out, came out right about the same time as mine, a new biography of Muhammad. It's actually her second biography of him. Mm-hmm. And I looked at it, we used the same sources, came to very different conclusions. And so, Ms. Armstrong, if you're watching this, I'd be very happy to discuss these things, to debate them in a public forum. You can contact me at jihadwatch at director@jihadwatch.org.
We'll broadcast it right here at Hot Air, uncut and uncensored. I want to talk about some of the sources that you used and a little bit about some of these terms, because again, I think it's so helpful for people to just have Muhammad 101, and you can't get this on most cable TV shows or broadcast shows where their eyes glaze over when you start talking about chapter and verse, and you really debate these people on their own terms and with their own sources. And you relied on a couple of things, and I want you to explain a couple of terms for people: tafsir, hadith, sunnah, and seerah. What do these mean?
Tafsir is commentary on the Quran. The Quran is, of course, the holy book of Islam. But the Quran itself is not very clear, especially for somebody who doesn't know anything about Islam and picks up a Quran to read it. There's one speaker in the Quran, that's Allah, and he's speaking to Muhammad. If you can imagine two people you don't know having a conversation about events in which you were not involved and not bothering to fill you in, that's like reading the Quran.
Right.
So you have to go to the tafsir, commentary on the Quran, written by Muslims and studied by Muslims today if they want to understand their faith, to understand the Quran. Hadith also fills in the Quran. Much of Hadith is tafsir. Hadith is traditions of Muhammad, his words and his deeds. And it fills in the circumstances of the revelation. It's called the Asbab al-Nuzul, the time in Muhammad's life in which a particular part of the Quran was given to him, supposedly by Allah. And the circumstances of the revelation, the things that were said and done at that time, often have a great deal to do with how the thing is understood today and in what way it infects Muslim practice. And so I discuss tafsir and hadith in this book insofar as they illuminate elements of Muhammad's life that are used today by the jihad terrorists to justify their actions. Because that is going to, as I say, keep happening if we don't confront it. Seerah is the biography of Muhammad. I wrote a seerah. Karen Armstrong has written seerahs. But the classic seerahs are the early ones that were written by pious Muslims to give Muslims themselves a view of who Muhammad was and what he did. And that is the primary source for my book, the Seerah of Ibn Ishaq, which was the earliest written by a Muslim, and it's the basic source for Muslim understanding of who Muhammad was and what he did. There are others that I used also that are almost as early, and together with the Hadith, the Seerah forms the Sunnah, which is accepted practice. It is the pattern of behavior that Muslims must follow. It covers virtually every aspect of life. It's very extensive. And a Sunni Muslim is one who follows the Sunnah, one who follows the practice as it has been delineated by Muhammad in his words and actions.
What do you think the top 3 misconceptions about Muhammad are, and why does it matter?
Probably, of course, the first one is that because he is the founder of a great religion, he must be somebody who taught general benevolence and the equality and dignity of all people before God and the necessity to love your neighbor in sum. This is something that he did not teach. He taught a very strong dichotomy that is set out, I think, very clearly and crisply in the Quran itself when it says in chapter 48, verse 29, Muhammad is the apostle of Allah. Those who follow him are merciful to one another, but ruthless to the unbelievers. Now that dichotomy, being merciful to the Muslims but ruthless to the non-Muslims, runs all the way through Islamic law and tradition and theology, as well as Islamic history. And so that in itself shows why it matters, because Muslims have behaved in that way and been ruthless to the unbelievers throughout history, operating according to his dictum, Muhammad's dictum, that non-believers should be either converted to Islam or subjugated as inferiors under the rule of Islamic law. And so we need to be aware of this, because this, not American policy in Iraq, and not American policy toward Israel, and not any of the other things that are commonly adduced as root causes for Islamic anger toward the West. That is what is underlying Islamic violence.
Right. That is so important, and it seems like there's a disconnect because so many people are ignorant about that imperative and that its roots in Islamic history and in the model of Muhammad, because people don't have no clue about all of that history. When they see Adam Gadon get in front of a camera and repeat this mantra of convert or die, or when we saw the Fox News reporters and the kidnapper's motivation, convert or die, people automatically assume that America is to blame for that and
Exactly.
not Muhammad.
Yes. And of course the issue becomes even more confused because the Islamic terrorists themselves so frequently criticize America, and they do so in a way that particularly conservatives find a resonance with because they see, well, America is immoral. There is an awful lot of immorality and a lot of things that we would like to change in the American society. However, it's completely out of focus to think that if those things were changed, the moral issues for conservatives or foreign policy issues for liberals, that this problem would go away. We could be the most virtuous people on the planet and have nothing to do whatsoever with any other country, avoiding foreign entanglements like George Washington said to, and have nothing to do with anybody else. And they would still be waging jihad against us because it is not based on the quality of the unbelievers. It is based on the fact that we are unbelievers, and this is rooted in Muhammad's teaching to make war against the unbelievers.
Right.